Mr. President, I rise today to talk about an issue that I, quite frankly, do not think gets enough attention on the floor of the United States Senate or on the floor of the House of Representatives, and that is the state of historically black colleges and universities, or as they're commonly known, HBCUs. Alabama is home to 14 of these institutions, the most of any state in the country. And with all due respect to my colleagues, we don't just have the most HBCUs, I believe we have the best. Tuskegee University is an HBCU, the only HBCU with a College of Veterinary Medicine. And the school produces over 75% of African American veterinarians in the world. It has also just hired its first female university president, Dr. Lily McNair. Alabama A&M University is the only 1890 land-grant university offering 4 PhD programs. They're also the leading producer of African Americans with PhDs in physics. Oakwood University is the nation's 5th highest producer of undergraduate African American applicants to our country's medical schools. Alabama State University, whose president, my friend Dr. Quentin Ross, has joined us in the gallery today, is home to the National Center for the Study of Civil Rights and African American Culture. ASU is currently doing preservation work on some never-before-seen documents, such as court pleadings, bond documents, and other official papers connected to the Montgomery bus boycott. And Lawson State Community College was named a champion of change in 2011 by then-President Barack Obama. Today, there are over 100 accredited HBCUs across the country, both public and private, in 19 states, in the District of Columbia, and the U.S. Virgin Islands. They enroll approximately 300,000 students, 80% of whom are African American, and 70% are from low-income families. While HBCUs only make up 3% of the country's colleges and universities today, they produce nearly 20% of all African American graduates. Among HBCU graduates, there are countless trailblazing Americans who have quite literally changed the course of our nation's history. Dr. Martin Luther King, Thurgood Marshall, Marion Wright Edelman, Langston Hughes, Katherine Johnson, among so many others. And according to the National Science Foundation, between 2002 and 2011, the top 8 institutions where African American PhDs in science and engineering earned their bachelor's degree were all HBCUs. HBCUs annually generate $14.8 billion in economic impact. They add more than 134,000 jobs for local and regional economies. In 2014, Alabama HBCU graduates can expect to earn total earnings of $130 billion over their lifetimes. I could go on and on with these remarkable statistics for these remarkable colleges and universities. For all of these incredible achievements, though, every achievement that I just named, HBCUs in Alabama and across the country are working against strong headwinds of serious financial struggles. The Government Accountability Office recently investigated the capital finance needs of HBCUs at the request of my colleagues, Senators Patty Murray and Senator Casey, also Congressman Bobby Scott and Congressman G.K. Butterfield. The report estimates that 46% of all HBCU buildings are in need of replacement or repair. This is due to deferred maintenance, the evolution of higher education and technology, and the fact that many of these buildings are state or federal registered historic places. For example, Tuskegee University is designated as a National Historic Site by Congress. This is a remarkable figure, 46%, a remarkable figure of all buildings in need of repair or replacement. And it's one that I hope all of my colleagues will agree is wholly unacceptable. But this is not a surprise for those who understand the challenges that these institutions have long faced. HBCUs lack a plethora of revenue sources. Public HBCUs rely heavily on state and federal grants, appropriations, and bonds. Private HBCUs have to rely on private or alumni giving and tuition and fees. On top of that, the GAO found that an HBCU's average endowment is half the size of a similarly sized non-HBCU. That's half the size, not of all non-HBCUs, but of half the size of similarly situated non-HBCUs. None of the 90 institutions of higher education in this country with endowments of greater than $1 billion is an HBCU. This results in an endless cycle for these schools that have contributed so greatly to our country and the talented students that they serve. With their limited revenue resources and the discrimination that they face in the bond market, it's difficult to maintain campus buildings that attract higher enrollment. Lower enrollment just leads to even less tuition and fees that are collected by each institution, and thus the cycle continues. But I didn't come down here today just to talk about these problems that our HBCUs face without offering some type of solution. So today I will be introducing the Strengthening Minority Serving Institution Act, which permanently extends and increases federal funds to all minority serving institutions. These federal funds are currently set to expire in fiscal year 2019. My bill goes beyond just supporting HBCUs, but is inclusive of other minority serving schools, like those that primarily admit Asian Americans, Pacific Islanders, Alaska Natives and Native Hawaiians, Native Americans and Hispanic Americans, among others. With this legislation, we increase mandatory funding from $255 million to $300 million for each of these institutions. They'll be able to put that money to good use for infrastructure improvements, technology upgrades, and other critical needs that have gone unfulfilled. While I'd hoped that we can make this a bipartisan effort, I haven't just yet heard back from any of my Republican colleagues. My Republican colleagues represent a fair share of these institutions, and I hope we'll still be able to gain some support across the aisle and move this bill through the Senate. This bill won't solve all of the challenges that HBCUs face, all of the challenges that they are working so hard to overcome. But I submit that it is a step in the right direction. And more importantly, it's the right thing to do for these schools that are part of the very foundation of our higher education system in Alabama and across the country. Thank you, Mr. President, and I yield the floor.